So Patrick McFadin is from Datastax, and rather than do a proper intro, I'm going to tell you a couple of interesting facts about him. He's going to do a talk at OSCON, is it?
Right, at OSCON.
Entitled, How to Succeed in Open Source Without Losing Your Soul. So I want to talk to him about that. And this will be 10 minutes, right? Not that
Not
topic.
at OSCON. It'll be a lot longer at OSCON.
And then the other interesting fact is Datastax is, of course, a very successful NoSQL database. And Patrick was on a panel before he joined Datastax talking about how NoSQL is a really bad idea. So I want to talk...
We're going to bring that up again?
at least about those two things. But why don't you introduce yourself and then and say the things, other things you should say besides that.
Okay, well, so I'm Patrick McFadin. I'm the chief evangelist for Apache Cassandra, which makes me a complete turncoat. I've been in the web acceleration, web performance world for a long time. I was an Oracle DBA for 15 years, so I'm recovering. What Salil was talking about is Tim O'Reilly put together a panel at Foo Camp of people for and against NoSQL. It was starting in 2008. This thing started up, and I was one of those people who was really into relational databases. And Tim, being really good at making people fight in public, put together this panel. And so that was kind of really my start at trying to advocate a position when it comes to whenever you build infrastructure and understanding the real value of what you're trying to do. And it was shortly after that that it failed. So I started changing my opinion rather quickly. And it was actually right after I ran out of money. I could no longer scale Oracle because I ran out of money. And that's when it really started to dawn on me that, that maybe I was open source on everything. My entire stack was open source except for my database. And it dawned on me that maybe I should change that point of view as well. And the obvious choice was MySQL, and Martin's here, so I should say that at least once. But changing to a different type of database was an easy choice because, of course, it was free at that time. It still is. So that was really my background and what got me here. So I guess I'm a convert, from the beginning.
And so what's this whole thing about being successful in open source without losing your soul? It sounded to me when we talked about it that you had a particular point of view about a particular business model that is more, what's the word, more noble than others.
Well, yeah, noble. All right, so there's really two types of businesses that are doing open source. There's a company that starts and creates an open source project, and then there are companies that are built around the idea of supporting an open source project. Datastax is the latter because Apache Cassandra existed. Jonathan Ellis and Matt Pfeil quit their day jobs and decided to support it full time and build a business around that. And that's where you met them, I'm sure. And this is a big difference. There was passion. They said, you know what, this is really cool. We want to help this out. And people are willing to pay some money to get that help. So let's start a business. Well, that's about the time where the evil could creep in. And the evil is, well, if we start developing things that no one else has and we close it up and we make it so that people have to come to us for the cool stuff, then we could make some money. And you see this I'm not going to name names, or you know who they are, but that happens a lot. And it's unfortunate because what it does is it winds up killing the project. One of the things about Cassandra that I've always loved is that it's all open. It's in Apache Jira. And there are no secrets. And your soul that you're trying to preserve is the openness, that it is open source, not partially open source. And so whenever you build a business model around it, or you're trying to build a business that says, we're going to make money doing this, after we make it open, that is really important. Because if you start closing it down, you're just going to be another software company that sells proprietary software. And it's a subtle difference, but I feel, and we have to fight for it all the time. We have arguments. I'm kind of known as the hippie in our company because I like to open source everything. Everything should be free, right? And there's a good balance. I think there's a natural tension between people who don't think everything should be free and those that do. But when we balance that properly, the people who win are the users, not customers, users.
But obviously, Datastax has closed source components.
That's the subtlety. And what do you build? So what we've done is, and these always get argued as well. And I may not land on the proper side of the argument for the business group, but the connectors and building. So we of course are behind Apache Cassandra quite a bit. We don't own the project. It is an Apache project. We have several committers that work for us, but there's several committers that work for other companies as well. There's a committer at Netflix, there's a committer at Spotify, there's 3 at Apple. So, there's a lot of spread in this development effort, and these are all very active committers, by the way. But Datastax also puts things on Cassandra that makes it a little more useful, like Hadoop or Solar. So those things, and put tooling around it that someone would be willing to pay for. It doesn't degrade the product. The product still works absolutely fine. It is exactly what you get from Datastax is exactly Apache Cassandra. We've added some tooling like our Ops Center product that lets you, it's easier to use. It's easier to manage. But that's just an add-on.
So the evil you're talking about is not having closed source components around the open source project, but something in the project. What's an example of something that's evil?
Rate limiting is a good one, or limiting it to a certain size. Like, it's open source right up until you get to about 5 gigs, and then it shuts down, right? And, it's great right up until that. I've known that model for a long time, and it's just annoying, right? Because you're going to probably want to use 6 gigs. And you feel like you just got short-sheeted. you got that moment where you thought it was open, and then now it's not.
I've got a couple questions for Patrick, but if you want to think of some, I'll get to the audience in just a minute. So I should also disclose I'm an investor in Datastax. With that said, why is Cassandra or Datastax better than Mongo or Couch or Redis or anything else?
Oh, you're going to drag me into that, aren't you?
Well, this is your chance to.
Yeah, this is my chance. Well, and every database has its own strengths and weaknesses. And from the generalized case, and what I advocate and what I've always worked around is the online application, the mobile, the web. Cassandra works well in that environment because it scales to about the size of what you probably are going to want with your mobile application or your web application, which is pretty high in most cases. It was built on Dynamo, which I think is probably one of the best academic papers about databases in the past 20 years. And it was built on a lot of computer science. It really is an amazing paper. And there are other databases that are based on it, like React, for instance. But the choices that are made along inside that project, I think Cassandra, and this is what drew me to Cassandra, made the right choices for what I want. I need an online transactional database that's always online. And that's a pretty critical thing. Nobody wants downtime anymore. Nobody wants to have a slow website. The U.S. president went in front of the U.S. on the Rose Garden and apologized for a website last year. That happened, right? We can't do this anymore. Twitter used to have the fail whale. Can you imagine Twitter with a fail whale today? It's not going to work anymore. So this is the world we live in. That's why I feel like Cassandra's a good choice for this particular case.
And if you had to compare, do you not want to compare the strengths and weaknesses with the other databases?
We could go on for a long time about that. Multi-data center, Cassandra's the only one that does multi-data center at the level that it does it. It is built in, it just works out of the box. And all the others do not do that without some sort of trickery or serious problems. So I think that's one of the strengths I would point out immediately.
So why is Mongo so popular?
Ease of use. I'll tell you right now, that is one of the strengths of Mongo. I used Mongo for years just because it was easy. But I just wrote a blog post about that. The problem with Mongo was that I just imagined that it would be a scaling database, but who has 1,000 nodes of Mongo? Nobody. It's never going to happen. And it's because it is easy to use, and that is a strength. But if you can't scale, then you're just a short promise. And I think we find I work with a lot of Cassandra users in the community who've moved away from Mongo because they kind of outgrew it. So that's one of the focuses we have with Cassandra, is making it easy to use.
And you feel Cassandra is competitive with Mongo and Couch, or Couchbase, but complementary to React and Redis. Is that correct?
Redis is a much different animal. It's an in-memory database. It has functions and features built in as an in-memory database. A lot of times you'll see Redis alongside Cassandra because they complement each other in a lot of ways. React is a key value store, so it's a different type of data store. It is very close to the original Dynamo paper, but it doesn't do multi-data center very well. And it has serious performance problems, where high performance is a bigger problem than usually Cassandra is the landing point.
Question that the man in the green shirt is not asking, but I'll ask it for him. When was the last time you wrote a line of code?
Last time I wrote a line of code was yesterday. Yeah.
Any other questions?
It was Go, by the way.
All right. Any other things on your mind? Our 10 minutes is up, but...
Got a question. Because actually it was somebody that was having a problem with the driver, and I needed to diagnose it. But I like to know what's going on out there. Go is quickly becoming a popular language with web services, the so-called microservices. So it's always a good idea to know what it's about. Because whenever you're having conversations with people, the last thing you want to do is not have any clue. I mean, you can't talk on the same level. And when you're talking to someone who's talking about a database, you need to have a lot of languages. Node, Ruby, PHP, Go, all these languages you should be able to at least have a conversation about. That's kind of the pitfall of being an infrastructure.
You know, I forgot to ask you, and you never said, what's your title and what do you do?
I'm chief evangelist. I told you what it was.
Well, no. Did you tell the audience?
I did say that. I'm
Oh,
chief
I'm sorry.
evangelist,
Okay.
yes,
All right.
for Apache Cassandra.
So what do you go around doing? Conferences?
This. No, I mainly do conferences, but I also work with users, open source users, and that's one of the things I think is really unique about Datastax is we invest a lot of money in just open source community, and I help users if they're a customer or not. I have a team of engineers. I'm an engineer. I'm a computer engineer. I have a team of engineers, and we help people. And if you pay or not, we don't care. That's not why we're here. We're here to help you. If you have a problem, I'll help you. And we know that some of those will eventually become customers. Some will not, and that's perfectly fine. But really what I want you to do is feel okay with your choice whether or not you're going to use Cassandra. And it's not because maybe you didn't understand how to configure it or how to program it. I'll help you get there. If you say it's not a good choice for me because it didn't fit my data model or I don't want this complexity in my environment or whatever your choice is, great. But I want to give it a fair shot.
Yeah, one of my other open source investments, one of the tactics they tried was finding people on Twitter having problems with the
People
product
find me.
and just helping them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And
it works.
My Twitter presence has kind of it's kind of a blessing and a curse because now people they put at Patrick McFadin, help, I got this problem. And if you've ever tried to do tech support in 144 characters, I'll tell you, it's really hard. I actually got like 10 in a row, says continue, continue, continue. I wound up helping the guy by sending him my email address, but I mean, I think Twitter's an interesting thing too, because that's the first place people complain. I mean, whenever United Airlines screws me over, what do? At United. Hey man, what's up with this late plane?
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Patrick.
You're welcome.